this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Curtain, and let's go on an adventure.
Welcome to this week's episode. This week I speak with Northern Ireland storyteller and absolute legend Liz Weir. It was great to have a chat with Liz, and I interviewed her during a period where she'd broken both arms, and so I figured she'd be bored and it would be a good time to chat to her because she's a very, very busy lady, still doing lots of storytelling in her 70s. It was a great honour to talk to Liz, and she shared lots of information for storytellers of all levels, and I found it absolutely fascinating. I hope you enjoy this episode with Liz. Welcome to this week's podcast. This week we have a very special guest from Northern Ireland, Liz Weir. Welcome to the podcast, Liz.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
I'd love to hear about your storytelling journey, what it is, how did you start, where have you been, and where are you now?
Been telling stories for about 53 years, so it's a long time. I went and trained after I did my degree. I did a postgraduate in library and information studies, and I chose the children's library option, and then they informed me that you had to tell stories to children, and that completely horrified me because I was a very shy person. I'd never had anything to do with children. So I started telling stories with picture books to children as a student, and then when I qualified as a children's librarian, I went on to share stories in libraries and so on. And then I met my first American storyteller. Now we're talking, this would have been 1973 I started, I suppose. And then I met my first American storyteller, maybe 80. And they told me that in America, people got paid money for telling stories. And I thought, hold on, this is Ireland where jobs are hard to find and lots of people tell stories. So I started putting the book down and telling stories orally, telling folk tales and so on. And I suppose I've been doing that ever since. And I continued as a librarian in different roles. I started my first story club in the mid 80s. And I had this vision that there'd be storytelling clubs all over Ireland. And that was my dream, and it's mostly come true. And then from then, when I got to 1990, I hit 40, and I decided that I'd go freelance and tell stories full time. So during that time, 1985, 1987, I traveled to Australia. I studied children's libraries in New South Wales for 8 weeks in 87 and got very involved in storytelling. Was just developing. Obviously, the Aboriginal people had told stories for many, many generations, but it was just starting to sort of be a thing in the arts. So I got involved there. So that's me up to date, potted history. I'm still telling stories.
There's a little bit to unpack there. So tell me, the story clubs. I'm interested in the story clubs, and what was the drive behind that, and how did you get it started, and are you involved in it anymore?
Oh yeah. One of the things that I did was to organize a summer storytelling scheme for children. That for listeners outside Northern Ireland, that was in the heart of what you called our troubles, civil disobedience, civil violence. So there was bombing and shooting on the streets. So we took the storytellers, because children couldn't necessarily get safely to the library, we took storytelling out to summer schemes, play centres. And I remember being at one in a very tough area, and all these older people were there. And I said, children's summer school? No, we've come for the stories. And I thought, who says storytelling is just for children? So in 1985, I think it was, I organised a day course called Yarn Spinning, who says storytelling is just for kids. And over 100 people came. And from that, I started the first yarn spinning group in Belfast. And then Belfast, Derry, Cork. And am I still involved? Yes, we've just got, well, I'm storyteller in residence for a thing called the Armstrong Storytelling Trust, armstory.org.uk. And part of that is to take stories into the community in Northern Ireland. So we run 3 sessions a month, 3 adult evening storytelling sessions, or afternoon and evening. and one of them's been running for 31 years, 32 years this year. So that's still going. And then recently we've got funding, cross-border funding between Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and we've set up 4 new story clubs as well. But there's also storytelling in Cork and Derry. It's huge. If people, and I'll just throw in this because you can tell I'm a librarian. If people look up storytellersofireland.org, you can find a list of all the different storytelling festivals, events, clubs. So I'm very much involved. I'm the director of the Glen Storytelling Festival in October in Antrim, where I live, and I'm on the committee of the Cape Clear International Storytelling Festival, which has been running since 1994, so it's a long time as well. Long time.
Oh, that's extraordinary. So, I mean, Ireland is, I grew up in Tasmania. It's an island, so there's a sense of identity that comes when you live on a small island, isn't there? So, what
Very
is it
much.
about Irish people and the Irish culture and storytelling? What do you think is the drive behind that?
Well, it's very ancient. I mean, people taught before they wrote, most Ireland is very famous for its literature, but literature starts with speaking, with communicating, and a lot of ours is very oral based. So um, I think also, the Irish language was the native language, but it was suppressed for many years. So I think there was this thing about keeping the culture going by speaking. I didn't grow up learning Irish, but again, it's about being proud of the identity. And of course, the Irish diaspora is huge all over the world. I've met with the Irish Support Network in Sydney, for example, and been to American groups and so on. So when people left Ireland, particularly in famine times in the 1840s, they had nothing to take with them apart from the clothes they wore, but they took their stories, they took their songs, and I think that's what kept it fresh and kept it alive.
Well, Mike Curtain is Irish, and he came out to Melbourne just after the famine, and he died 6 months after arriving and left all the children, like 6
Oh my
children.
goodness.
So it was pretty, yeah, it was pretty. I don't have any stories of that because my great-great-grandfather was only 4 when his father died. So, that didn't get passed on as much as I would have liked. But I
Mm,
think it's a really, just like my Scottish heritage, I think all those of us who don't live there, we feel a connection to it because it's part of our heritage, I think. And
very
um,
strong thread of connection. Yeah. That's why I
yeah,
like the term yarn spinning, because the strands of our stories are all interwoven and it makes it stronger.
mm,
So that's why we would even, if you look at the Armstrong Storytelling Trust logos, we have strands interwoven. It's the
mm,
strength in the stories, I think, is there, and it continues through the generations. I think that's very important. So nowadays, again, our work, Ireland's become multicultural. The way when I went to Australia first, it was a blast because 1985 it was this multicultural area of Sydney metropolitan area. Never seen so many people from so many different countries, but now Ireland's become more multicultural, and with that, that's brought um, things like the rise of racism, which I feel storytelling can do much to prevent. Storytelling can promote understanding between cultures.
mm,
Storytelling can value the stories people have brought. Just the way Irish people went off to Australia or
mm,
America, we're getting people coming in here from Syria or from Sudan, and they
mm,
may not have very much with them apart from their stories and their culture. So
mm,
my job is, I hate the idea of a big melting pot. I hate that idea. You shouldn't be sublimating your own culture. You should be celebrating your own culture. And I mean, that lovely song about We Are Australia.
mm,
It's celebrating the fact that people have come from all over the world and
mm.
together are building a stronger nation. That's my feeling. I used to be very envious of even the words in that song, because I think I'm sort of obsessed with Australia, I have to tell you. I nearly was out there for a year. I got offered a job as children's library consultant for the State Library of New South Wales for a year, and I was all set to go, everything was in place, and my boss got a year's secondment, and I was told he was getting away and I wasn't getting away. So I'm always I'm counting the days now till my next visit, hopefully at Christmas this year. Hopefully.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. So you have some connections in Australia, obviously, still.
Yes, my sister-in-law is in Adelaide, my brother-in-law is in Sydney. So on one side, my sister-in-law from my own family, my brother-in-law from my ex-husband's family. we're very close to all the family. So yeah, and then many friends I've made over the years. Spoke at the Australian Storytelling Conference 2 years ago. It's actually happening very shortly now. And some of my friends from America have already landed in Wollongong and are telling stories there. So it's great to see. I'm watching it vicariously. I'm actually laid up with 2 broken arms at the minute, so I'm watching the photographs and listening to them with envy. Envy.
Well, by the time this goes live, it'll be all over. But I'm going to Sydney this week to go to the conference. I'm very much looking forward to it.
One of my best friends, Alton Chung from Hawaii, one of my best friends is there, and he's a great storyteller. So you see lots of people I know.
Amazing. Oh, I look forward to it. So you said you tell folk tales. Is that what you mostly tell?
Yes, indeed. America, very many people are telling personal stories. Ireland, that doesn't really fly. We tell personal stories in company and socially, but no, we've got this wonderful, rich sort of foundation of folk tales, and why would I want to be telling my story? I love the magical stories. I love romantic stories. I don't particularly tell. I don't tell the big myths. I don't particularly tell the legends. I prefer to tell tales of the countryside, tales of social history, any sort of folk tales. We have, I don't know if you know, but in Ireland we have this wonderful resource. It's www.duchas.ie, which is the Irish Folklore Commission's collection of folk tales, which were collected in the 1930s. And they're all online and many have been transcribed. And you just have to put in any subject under the sun, whether it's fairies or hares or times of the year, and you'll come up with all these wonderful stories. So there's thousands and thousands of stories. So why would I want to be either telling my original stories or personal stories? I tell a few of each, but I like folk tales. I think you should trust folk tales.
Yeah. Why should we trust them? What's your philosophy behind that?
I think they have basic, sometimes of real truths, unspoken truths. I think folk tales are subversive. They can get under doors and through keyholes and making a point. It's like every religion in the world uses stories to make a point, and folk tales could do that, whether they're dealing with subjects like anti-bullying or whether they call it mobbing in Australia. I think I remember that from the past, anti-bullying, but also sensitive things, stories of who doesn't like magic and enchantment. That keeps me going, the possibilities, endless possibilities that there can be a different outcome to things.
Yeah. So I imagine you've got a bank of stories that you don't need to learn anymore now. Do you ever come across stories that you go, oh, that was a good one, or you hadn't heard before?
Yeah. No, I never stopped taking stories on board. I think you'd get very stale if you didn't keep replenishing stories. Okay, I could trot out my stories I've been telling for years and years. But for example, this year we got a grant from the Arts Council. 3 of us women are doing a thing called a Cloak of Wisdom, and it's women's stories reimagined. And so my brief was obviously to get some stories working with Vicky and Anne. Anne plays the harp and the clarinet. And so we've done a blend of stories and music. So again, I had to work on that one and get some new stories. And we're touring that at the minute. It's really nice to do. So no, I'd get stale if I just did the same thing all the time. I'd get bored.
Mm. And you said you had some themes that are the themes that you like, social justice and stuff, that you quite often tell as well. Do you often go prepared with a story to events, or are you more of a let's see what story rises?
I am sort of a wing it person. You can do that. Obviously, if you're just starting off and you only got a few stories, you can't leave things to chance. You need to be really well. I mean, if I was doing a training session, I'd tell people how they have to be prepared and always have more stories than they need. But often I go with the sort of vague idea of what I might tell, but circumstances can change. Somebody can trigger something. Sometimes stories fight their way through and say, no, not that one. Tell me. And they beat the other story out of the way. So I think that's the lovely thing about it, that I like impromptu choices. And sometimes things come into your head that you haven't thought of before. Somebody says something. I mean, I like quite a lot of, I wouldn't say audience, but well, I do audience participation stories for kids, but often if, for example, I'm with a group of older people, as I did this week, including myself in that, they'll say something that will trigger me to another story. So you have to, I think it's the flexibility. I always say storytelling is very different from acting or drama because you've got the script there, whereas these stories are floating around my head and they have to be pulled forward at the right time, at the right place. I think that's important.
Mm. Did that always happen where they just sort of float into your head, or were you like in the beginning, was it a bit more, you had to think about it more?
Oh, you'd have to think about it more when you don't have so many stories, you know. I mean, but I know people that have like 6 stories and they call themselves a storyteller and they have a brochure, but that's very tricky. Like, you know, you need to put the work into storytelling. And part of, I mean, my main thing nowadays is training other people. Nobody showed me what I was doing wrong. I made all the mistakes, and I don't want other people to do that. They can skip forward if they can realize what they were doing wrong, without having to make those mistakes. Sometimes you have to make a mistake to learn, but I prefer to know what to look out for. You know, you need to find out as much as you can about the audience you're going to. If you're going to a nursing home, is everybody compos mentis or people living with dementia? I do a workshop called "Is she still talking?" Which is the sort of thing that gets said to me sometimes when I go out. You need to find out how many they are, what age they are, when's the tea. In Ireland, that's very important because when the tea trolley comes, everything stops. So you need to know like basic information. I do a workshop called Warming Up for Santa, which is about all the things that can go wrong. One of the worst gigs a storyteller can ever get is warming up for Santa, because I don't know if you know it, but Santa's inevitably late because it takes him longer to get away from places. So you're continuing to hold this audience while Santa's waiting, you're waiting for Santa. So you have a gaggle of sort of overexcited children and a group of parents who got out of work for half an hour and they're stuck there for an hour. So, you know, you have to be fairly flexible to deal with that sort of nightmare scenario. So I love doing that. I do a talk called Disasters I Have Known, and there have been a few. But again, I don't want other people to make those same mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I did a Christmas gig last year and I was next to Santa, so that was fun.
I know,
So
I know.
it
Some of
didn't
them are
work.
creepy. Some of them are creepy. Some of them are okay, but some Santas are very creepy. No.
Yeah. And so the training of other storytellers, what does that involve for you? Is it online or in
Well,
person or mentoring?
both, all of the above. Often I take interns who come, and I have a home which has a hostel, a tourist hostel. So often I'll get an intern who comes and stays for free, helps me in the hostel, and travels around with me and learns about storytelling. I've done that for a lot of storytellers, some young Americans, Swiss, people from German, from all sorts of places. That's one way of doing it. Other way of doing it is formal workshops, maybe one day or 4 over 4 weeks. But now, recently, because of funding we've received, we do the first accredited storytelling training in Northern Ireland, which is the National Open College Network, where it's 22 hours of training and they get a certificate at the end of it. And the aim is they have to prepare and deliver 3 stories, and the last one's in front of a public audience. And they have to do all sorts of paperwork, assessing
Mm.
themselves, peer assessment, and then we give feedback, obviously, as the trainers. So that's been a very exciting thing. I think I've trained about 80 people in the last 3
Mm.
years, probably, to do that. We
Mm.
just finished another group, so it's going well.
Yeah, that's interesting in the accreditation. I noticed that that happens in Scotland as well. So what
Mm.
what's the drive
Ours is a bit
behind
different.
yeah, what's the
Mm.
drive behind the accreditation? What does the
To
is
acknowledge
it
storytelling as an important art form. That's
yeah.
very important to show, and to show that people have been trained up to a certain level. I mean,
Mm.
here's the question. If you ask me the other way, do people do they need a qualification to be a storyteller? No, of course they don't. Some of the best storytellers I know are in their 80s and they'll ramble and they'll go off on one. But it's really good. We train people in how to select a story, how to prepare a story, how to deliver a story, presentation skills, but also to help people select stories that suit them. I mean, you know, and
Mm.
I know, you hear a story and you think, that's a brilliant story. I don't ever want to tell it. It won't
Mm.
suit me. And one of the things that I think I've built up over 50 years is to know what story suits what person at what time. And so if I can advise people, I mean, I get calls all the time from storytellers saying, I need a story about this, I need a story about that. And again, I like to help people find that sort of thing. I think it's very important.
Yeah, for me, I mean, my least favorite story is The Ugly Duckling, and I won't ever tell that story. What is it
But me and
about?
chicken licking and henny penny
No,
and turkey licking. Oh, I can't
no, they're
stand
not. They're not me. They're not. I'm more in the wonder,
Yeah.
magical space for my sort of story. How how does someone not know where they want to, what sort of stories they want to tell, or is it something that is more comes within from them?
You develop it. When we start with people on our first day, we do one day, full day of training. And people are there and they don't even know why they're there often. And they don't know what stories they like. They don't know what stories they tell. But over a period of 6 weeks or something, they're hearing lots of stories. They're finding which ones speak to them, if you like. Stories find you quite often. We'll give suggestions. I think this might suit you, or this might suit John, or this might suit somebody else. So you have to develop a style. We have the latest course. We just trained 8 people there, and one woman friend, she's a poet, and I mean, she's taken stories from Eddie Gunnahan that she heard online, and she's made them her own because she's putting in her own phrasing. She's putting in lovely descriptive terms. There's one where these two guys shoot a goose at a fairy fort, and then this apparition comes and he's covered in buckshot, and he says, "You shot me. I was a goose, but now I'm a person now, and I can only be cured if the person who shot me takes out the buckshot." So, and as Maura was telling it, she says, he started to take out these pieces of shot like a hen pecking a cabbage. I just love that image, So people put their own phraseology into it, and I think that's great. The worst thing I think about the whole Zoom thing is that people have heard stories. They hear you tell a story online. Within 2 minutes, you get a message saying, "Where's that story from? I'd like to tell that story. Can I tell that story?" And you go away and do the work. Find out where the story's from. I like to get people to try and tell at least get three sources if they can get three sources, and then make your own version. But don't just suck it up like a vampire and spit it out again, word for word. And I've had examples of this in my career where people have maybe listened to a CD and then just copied it. And they literally take the words right out of my mouth. I don't like that. I'm very generous about sharing stories with people, but people need to do the work. I think that's very important.
So by doing the work, you mean do the research, engage with their own sense of self and their own values? Yeah.
And work on the story and practice. That thing about man's walking in New York, and he sees a man with a fiddle case under his arm, and he says, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And the violinist says, "Practice, practice, practice." That's how you do it. You need to practice. You can't just expect to be wonderful all of a sudden.
This is true. I imagine you've had some really wonderful moments in your career, 50 years or so. Do you have any standout moments that you'd like to share?
Many. During COVID, I wrote my memoir, which hasn't yet come out because I just haven't done anything with it. I wrote it, and that was me. For example, during the Troubles in Belfast, I turned up to tell stories to a group of children. When I got there, the place we were to tell in had been blown up overnight, but the children were all there, so I put them up on a wall, and it was the Three Billy Goats Gruff, my favourite story when I was a child. So I'm trip-trapping over the bridge, and an armour-plated police vehicle came down the street, and my audience, a boy and girl, jumped off the wall, picked up stones, and started pelting the police, with me standing there going, "I'm from the library. I've never seen these children in my life before." But the thing is, when that went past, they came back and sat on the wall as if nothing had happened because they wanted to hear the end of the story. And I believe that's really so important, that no matter how fast our society forces children to grow up, they always want to hear the end of the story. They're still children. And so that's sort of example, or examples where I was telling stories with a group of people who had dementia. One old lady was like slumped down, and then I started talking about, I was doing reminiscence work about the tin bath, And all of a sudden she put her head up and said, I had to wash Daddy's back in the bath. And what you don't do is jump in. So I waited, and she said, he had shrapnel in his back. So at that point I said, was he in the Great War? She said he was. And she went on to tell me about her father getting injured, but about her uncle who'd gone off to war. He hadn't joined up, and a girl had given him a white feather, which meant he was a coward. So then he went and joined up, and he was killed 3 months later. And from that discussion, she told me about a thing called the dead man's penny, which was a big bronze plaque that families were given when they lost somebody. And over 1 million of those were given out to families in the UK. And from that, I wrote a new piece called All for the Dead Man's Penny, which interwove the story of a young Irish soldier going to war, a beautiful folk tale called The Queen of the Lonely Isle, and a modern day story about a young woman trying to find her family history. So that's all thanks to a chance meeting of that old lady in the dementia centre. So, never underestimate people. People have extraordinary stories, I love that sort of work. I love getting people to share work. I've done a lot of those sort of projects. So storytelling, you see people advertising themselves as performance storytellers. And I've actually written to one very well-known storyteller and said, what do you mean by a performance storyteller? Because every time I go out to tell stories, it's a performance, whether it's 1,000 people at a festival in America or whether it's 10 people sitting around in this nursing home. It's still you're putting on a performance. But there's things called platform tellers, obviously at the festival you're up there. But I love the sort of work where you're sitting around and sharing stories, what you call applied storytelling, where you're working with specific groups, whether it's multicultural, whether it's intergenerational with young children and very old people, which is a lovely thing to do. So there's many, 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 many aspects of storytelling. And sometimes I think when you watch social media and so on, it's all about the performance, whereas I think it's all about the work, the sharing, the interaction. It's my view.
Do you think that's because social media is so visual and, everybody's told to have a platform to share that because that's where people get their information from? And is that changing storytelling, do you think, or was it always there, that performative,
I think
stagey
the
type
people
thing?
the people that aren't shouting about it are still there in the background doing the work. You know, obviously there's a big festivals, and I've been to festivals all over the world, and that's good. But then it's also good to sit in your local community centre and work with a group of school children and older people, getting to talk about experiences. Children can't get their head around the fact that people didn't have phones. They say things like, "Did you have a Nokia?" And the older people saying, "What? Did you have a Nokia?" And they're saying, "We didn't have a phone. You didn't have a phone." Like, they can't believe this. So I love that sort of work. That gives me a real kick. So no, I think just social media. What I believe about social media is you have to use social media. Don't let it use you. And I have many, many pages. I work with all sorts of my own Liz Weir Irish Storyteller, Liz Weir, Armstrong Storytelling Trust, Glen Storytelling Festival, Storytellers of Ireland, you name it, they're there. And you just work between them. And it's a great way of communicating with people all over the world. I'm reaping the benefit of that. I'm stuck here in care with 2 broken arms. I'm getting messages from people all over the world because storytelling, I believe, is the original World Wide Web. We're connected wherever I go. I went to Adelaide, I met storytellers there. I go to Singapore, I meet storytellers there. They're all over the place. Sometimes they're hidden, you have to find them. But most times they're pretty vocal.
Yeah. No, that's a really great insight. I think, as an emerging teller myself, I find it, find that balance between sharing on social media to get work and get it out there, particularly in this community, because there isn't a lot here, but not doing it so much that you lose the authenticity of telling a story to a smaller group and engaging in that, like you said, applied storytelling where people talk back and share their moments.
I think so. And one of the things that I think is that social media doesn't get you work. Websites don't get you work. What gets you work is good work. You know, storytelling is still very much about word of mouth. I mean, print and paper refuses nothing. You can do the flashes, brochure, let the Americans send these publicity packs out and so on. That's not what gets you work. What gets you work is people knowing that you do good work and they've heard about you and so on. Obviously, with the rise of things like YouTube and during COVID, I mean, Zoom has really done a lot for storytelling because people couldn't have afforded to hear, say, our Irish storytellers in America. You might get an invitation over once a year, but now everybody all around the world is hearing each other. I go on to Australian platforms, Canadian, American, of course. I still run my Saturday night sessions every Saturday night. It's on last night. 4 years I've been running these online sessions. When you asked me, by the way, about the training, our accredited course, we do a mix, a hybrid between face-to-face, 2 full days, and the rest are online. And storytelling online, it's very easy to do training online. I love it.
And what sort of feedback are people giving for the trainings when you do them? And what do they then go and do with that?
Well, we train usually 12 people at a time, and from those 12, about 4 go off and earn money telling stories. Now, not full-time necessarily, but part-time. I try and encourage situations where they can get work and try and hire them for small gigs till they get experience. But I have to say to people, often you have to do some gigs for free so people get to hear you. I always say, go to your local nursing home, share stories there, get the people there to write a review of you. So, that's a really good way to get work. But the other 8 from the group maybe never wanted to be professional storytellers. They want to get better at storytelling because they're teachers or librarians or care workers. So not everybody wants to be a professional storyteller, but they do want to take storytelling seriously, and I think that's quite important.
You said something earlier about intergenerational storytelling. I love the sound of that. So working with older and younger people together, is that what you mean?
Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, you take people in a nursing home, their children are probably 60, their grandchildren are 40, their great-grandchildren are 20, but you bring in a group of preschool children, they love it. Plunk the children down the floor, have the adults around them, do Incy Wincy Spider, or Ride a Cock Horse to Banbury Cross, or Baba Black Sheep. All the old people know all those rhymes, but even people with dementia remember those rhymes, and so you're joining in together. I was doing a session once, and I had the little ones and the old people, and one woman was completely, as far as I was concerned, you looked at, you thought this woman's not with us, she's gaga. And I had my teddy bear, which is very old. I brought the teddy bear out, and all of a sudden the head went up and she started singing, me and my teddy bear, got no worries, got no cares. I haven't sung that myself for about 60 years. And so we taught it to the children. So you have these miracle things that happen with stories. So that's one thing. The last thing we did was series in 4 different, there were independent living facilities. These were people that weren't care homes. They had their own apartments within a complex with a warden. You have those in Australia too. So we did 3 sessions of reminiscence. And then the 4th session, we brought in a local primary school who came with questions like, what sort of phone did you have? Or did you have a bathroom in your house? Or what was your favorite food? Or where did you go on your holidays? And terrific sessions. The older people came alive and the young people went away because their mummies, their grannies were maybe 40, and these people were 70, 80. It's terrific. We've a woman in here at the minute. She's 96, clear as a bell. Remembers the Second World War, remember the Blitz, the blackout, remembers VE Day when the war was ended in Europe. Fantastic. What a privilege to spend time with somebody like that. And think how wonderful it is for children who are learning about history to meet a person who's got personal memories of that, because so often in families we don't ask the people until they're gone, and then it's too late to ask them. So I think that's important.
No, I 100% agree. I think there's a beautiful poem, I can't remember what it's called, but it's, once a person passes, their whole story goes with them, that very intimate stuff that they have that they might not have shared. I walk around with my parents these days, and whenever they say, give me an anecdote, I press record on the recorder and note down what they're saying, because just
good.
little
It's
things
really good.
like, getting hit with a stick when my dad was little or something like that. Those sort of
All the
things,
teachers,
they're valuable.
the best teacher, the worst teacher. There's certain topics, school days, the best teacher, the worst teacher. Did you go on outings? Mostly no. Did you have to bring, we used to have to bring coal in for the fire or sticks for the fire in school, even not in my day, but before me. All of those things. So there are lots and lots of resources where you can check out the right questions to ask. How did you meet your husband? Did you meet at work? What was the first money you earned at work? Lots and lots of things. So we would do it thematically. One week we maybe do work. One week we do high days and holidays. What do you remember? Big outings, the coronation, or whatever it happens to be. How could you not? You couldn't get bored doing this work. It's such good work.
Oh, it's really, I love what I'm hearing. It's just really inspiring and giving me lots of ideas, and I'm hopefully that it'll give listeners lots of ideas too. So this podcast is called The Heart of Storytelling. What do you think is at the heart of storytelling, and why in modern times do we need this art form?
What's at the heart of storytelling is not telling, but listening. And these days, more than any other time, we need to listen to each other. Unfortunately, some people just like to talk and they don't like to listen. So it's not just about listening, it's about active listening to show people that, you're actually interested in what they're saying. And I think COVID was very hard on young people, very hard on them, particularly when they didn't get to school and so on. So we see them sort of regressing a bit. So we need to make opportunities where they can actually listen. And society's got very fast. People don't take the time to listen. And I think if you take the time to listen to another person's story, you're showing them respect, even if you disagree with the story. That's why I do a lot of work on conflict resolution. Even in conflict situations, we're not asking you to agree with the other person, but we are asking you to listen to what they have to say. And that very act of listening shows respect. I'm a big Aretha Franklin fan, so RESPECT, respect is very important. So that's what I think is at the heart of storytelling, is that ability to listen to another person, to hear them have their say. We're not expecting to win them over, but at least give a fair go, as you'd say in Australia.
Yeah, for sure. And so I imagine, when you are holding space for those conversations, I imagine difficult things come up, difficult topics, difficult conversations. How do you manage that? And do you have support there with you, or how does that work?
Yeah, before you start with any group, you have to have ground rules, about respecting each other's boundaries, about, if it's confidential, that whatever happens in the session stays in the session. I mean, I tell anecdotes, but all of the anecdotes I would tell, I would have had permission to share, I think that's one thing. If you're doing really, I always say I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm a storyteller. If you're doing things, for example, in Northern Ireland, when the Troubles were on and post conflict, as we call it, I think it's really important that there should be some backup if people need it, if things open up that are very tricky, about deaths and destruction. If things open up like that, you have to have professional help available there if people need it. I would have worked quite a lot in prisons. And I would have worked with what they call the ODCs, or the ordinary decent criminals. These would be your burglars and your thieves and that sort of thing. But then I worked with political prisoners in Northern Ireland, people who were in prison as a result of bombings, shootings, a lot of violence. So I'd be working there with people. In one case, there's a man who'd killed the husbands of two women I knew. And, it's like working in the hospice. If I go to work in hospice, I don't start off by saying, how long have you got? So when I go into prison, I don't say, what are you in for? Some of the famous people, what they're in there for. I was in the women's prison where people had killed their husbands and that sort of thing. They'd been quite famous. But you just park it and you work with people as people. That's a hard thing to do sometimes. It is a hard thing to do. Like, for example, I don't work with sex offenders. I just can't do that. Okay, you say you don't work with sex offenders, but you work with murderers. Yeah, it sounds strange, but that's just what works for me.
Mm.
And when you are working with people, you need some backup as well. Because as a storyteller, you sometimes hear very tough stories. So, there has to be somewhere that I can go and decompress, if you like. I think that's quite important. But, your average listener, maybe to this, saying, what is she talking about? Storytelling is just about entertainment, is it not? No, it's not. It's about so much more than entertainment. Entertainment's a great thing, but I think storytelling gives you an in-depth knowledge of people you're working with. But there has to be trust built up. There has to be an understanding. You're not going to go off, and I'm not going to go off and base a show on somebody's personal story. Can't do that ethically. I think ethics are very important, and ethically, I wouldn't ever do that.
Mm. Sounds like you're still very busy, Liz, with your
Yeah,
profession.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll be 75 in October, and storytelling is one of the few things I think you can get better at as you get older. But part of my remit at the minute is to get more young storytellers, get more younger people sharing stories. And I went to Marrakesh in January for the International Storytelling Festival there, and we broke the world record for the longest continuous storytelling, which was 80 hours and 35 minutes. And we had several young storytellers from England, from Ireland, and it's lovely to see, and Morocco, of course, these younger storytellers taking part. So it's truly intergenerational.
I teach young people storytelling, so I do use story for literacy, but also I'm secretly teaching them to be storytellers as well.
Yeah,
So
great.
I think is really important for young people to,
And it's
yeah,
just magical. If they
yeah,
believe they can do it, if you have high expectation, young people will rise to those expectations. If you think you're beaten before you start, well, you will be. I
yeah,
think it's really important. And often it's the shyest child with the
mm,
quietest voice that turns out to be the best storyteller. And the
yeah,
loud ones have to learn to shut up and listen. But I mean,
yeah,
I would work with stories. I hate the term I use storytelling. I tend not to use storytelling. I work with storytelling for things like anti-bullying, where you're sharing a story.
mm,
The lion and the rabbit, where the lion's bullying the rabbit, but then you'll get them to share their own story and
mm.
maybe create their own story. So creative writing comes out of storytelling as well. But to me, you start with the spoken, you don't start with the written.
Yeah, it really works for so many
I
levels.
do a lot of workshops for student teachers. So many student teachers have grown up not knowing any storytelling. They haven't
Mm,
experienced storytelling. And how
mm,
can then they tell stories? So I would go to teacher training colleges and show them the power of told stories. And they love it. Just
mm,
kids, they love it. So it's people taking time and interest in you.
mm. So I imagine that you've got lots of advice for people who are storytellers, lots of wisdom to share. Have you got any top tips that you might like to share?
Only tell a story that you really enjoy yourself. You may well hear a story and think it's good, but if you don't like it, what's the point? That's the first thing. The most important thing, when people say, what do you need to be a good storyteller? The most important thing is to know what story will suit what audience. I mean, there's stories I would tell at 10 o'clock in a pub that I wouldn't tell in a church session. Not because they're bad language or something, they're just not suitable. But that takes you to build up a good repertoire and to realize the difference yourself. So my most important advice is listen, listen, listen. Listen to as many stories as you can. So that's why I encourage people to go on to these online sessions. Like I know the Australian storytellers have one. As I say, I do it every Saturday night, so it's early morning in Australia. But we have Australians who come on to it to listen, and you're getting to hear storytellers from all around the world. Some of the top American storytellers come on and share stories freely, and that's lovely. But there are many, many online things that you can buy into, or some of them are for free. So I think expose yourself to as many different styles of storytelling until you can find out what works for you. An awful lot of people, when they start storytelling, model themselves on one storyteller and actually sound like them sometimes. Sometimes I've heard people who sound like Robin Williamson or who sound like a particular person. And then gradually they'll develop their own style, and that's good. It's
Mm,
okay doing that until you develop your own style. But nobody wants a name of Kelly clone. Nobody wants a Liz Weir clone. we're all individuals, and you have to find your own style. But many of my stories, for anybody listening, can be found on YouTube. You just put in YouTube Liz Weir, you'll find lots of stories that mostly recorded during COVID times, but they're there for the posterity, you know. Storytellers of Ireland have also, actually, this might interest your listeners. Storytellers of Ireland on YouTube have got 11 new stories up there, video stories of stories filmed in the landscape, and 9 out of the 11 are brand new storytellers. So as part of our project, we got funding to record them telling stories, and I have to say they did a really fine job. So those would be people you wouldn't necessarily hear anywhere else. So Storytellers of Ireland.
Wow. So were they Irish stories that they were telling?
Oh,
Yeah.
mostly yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Verse of Macha, and some lovely stories. Really good.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I could talk to you for hours. It sounds like you've got lots and lots of wisdom to share, but we're sort of out of time. So where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and your work?
Yeah. Social media, Liz Weir Irish Storyteller on Facebook, at Liz Tells Stories on Instagram, lizweir.net on the web. What else have I got? Armstrong Storytelling Trust has a Facebook page, and www.armstory.org.uk. This is a trust, a charity set up by Roger Armstrong, whose parents set up the first Polycarnic yarn spinners 32 years ago. And so he supports storytelling throughout Northern Ireland. So you'll see all our different events on there. And there's, for example, one thing that people won't have heard about, we have this geodesic dome. One of our storytellers got this beautiful block dome, and she tells a story and projects an animation over the dome. So children are sitting there watching the animation and listening to her voice telling the story. It's fantastic. And she uses sensory stuff. So she's got smells and touches, and it's brilliant, innovative. You'll find that on the armstory.org.uk.
That sounds fascinating. I can't wait to come to Ireland and see it.
Well, do come. You're very welcome. Ballyammon Barn is where I live. I have a hostel. Storytellers come from all over the world. But I'm teaching a workshop for the National Storytelling Network at USA on the 17th of July, and it's on storytelling and conflict resolution. It'll be online, so that'll be maybe an interesting thing for people.
Is that recorded?
It probably will be recorded, yeah. I think if you buy it, you'll get recording of it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Liz. It's been wonderful to chat
Pleasure.
to you and meet you. And you came full of a huge reputation. So it was really a great honor to be able to talk to you today.
It's a pleasure, and all the best with your own storytelling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed the podcast and would like to support me to continue the work that I'm doing, please head to buymeacoffee.com/Alyssa Curtain and make a donation or sign up for a subscription. This is a passion project, and as such, it is voluntary. So your donations make it easier for me to continue this work. Thank you for your support. Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairytale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alyssacurtain.com or at Alyssa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.